Hello, hello. Thank you for watching. Today I am starting my grief series. I'm really hoping that this helps someone who has experienced grief or someone who is still healing from grief and going through the motions right now. I decided to do this series, and I'm probably going to break it up in about four parts, maybe. Um, Today is January 7th, and I thought today would be a good day to start. I was already planning to do this, but I needed to get my thoughts together and figure out which way I wanted to approach it. So I picked today, January 7th, because it is 2 months from the day that my 19-year-old son passed away, which would have been November 7th. And I realized in the midst of me going through my grief that there are so many other people that are healing and going through the motions of grief also. So I said this would be a good way to shed some light and some understanding, some empathy on the subject and to other people. So I've done a little research while keeping myself occupied. And there's some things I want to point out about grief. Like I said, this will probably be a four-part series that I'm going to do. But today I'm going to start with the basics, which would be what is grief? I don't know if everybody really knows the meaning and how it can affect you and others. Some things you really wouldn't understand unless you actually experience it. In the midst of this series, I will be sharing some personal information about myself and what grief looks like to me. Unfortunately, this isn't my first rodeo experiencing grief. And I will say that in the biggest time of grief that I had before, I didn't go through it the same way I'm going through it now. I was looking for a way to cope before. And for me, that looked like turning to the bottle. And so, even though I have a long way to go in my healing journey, as far as the grieving process. The way my healing looks like and my grief experience this time is different from before, because getting drunk to cope, to think that it's easing the pain, easing the loss, taking your mind off of it, is probably one of the worst ways to go about it, but that's what I did. And at that time, which would have been around 7 or so years ago, at that time and that particular loss, I just felt like I needed to do whatever I needed to do to cope and get through this. I never read about a healthy way to grieve. I just knew what I was feeling. And in the midst of all that, I lost my significant other and I lost my favorite cousin. And that is just around that particular time, um, within the course of a year. So at that point in my life, I was all over the place, and I decided to try to drink away the pain. In hindsight now, I think that it more so prolonged the process of healing and grief than it did make it better. And, you know, I went to work, I came home, I got drunk, and stayed up all night. At that point in time, I wasn't really sleeping or eating or whatever. And that was the way I was coping, or the way I thought I was coping. Lord knows I really wasn't coping, but. And that went on for a long while. So instead of turning back that way, which in my mind, I felt like I had every reason to pick up a bottle and go for it, I felt like my whole world fell apart. And now, feeling it again now that I lost my son, which is an even different type of situation. I carried him for 9 months. He's been with me his whole life. I've watched him turn into a responsible young man, and I was very proud of him. He, but neither here or there. I have my good days and I have my bad days. So this time around, I have decided to turn to the Lord and get through this healing process with God instead of the bottle, instead of whatever it is that people use to ease the pain or to think that we're coping. And I just didn't want to go back there because that's not my life anymore. And although it's not easy. Like even right now, this isn't easy. Just talking to people and, you know, making this video because I am more of a private person, but, it's been put on my spirit that I need to do this series. And even if it helps one, two, three, four people by me sharing some key factors of grief and a little bit of my journey and story, then it's worth it to me because I'm not the only person that goes through this. And I know that there are plenty of parents who have lost children. There are plenty of people who have lost their significant others, spouses, and, you know, family members, parents, friends that were like family. It's a lot of different aspects of things that are no longer in our lives. So I'm going to start off telling you what the 7 stages of grief are. Now, some people minimize it down to 5, but I'm going to go on and tell you the 7. And the first one would be shock and denial, which a lot of times losing somebody, unless you knew it was coming, um, you know, or they were up in age, um, it's it's always a shock or a feeling of disbelief. Sometimes you just can't believe it. I know situations of people who were in denial also and may have acted like it didn't happen and it wasn't going on. So the first stage is shock and denial. The second stage is pain and guilt. And this is a big part of it. This is a really, really, really big part of it. I know that sometimes the pain of losing someone or something, because I know there are people who lost pets and things of that nature as well, that they feel an overwhelming sense of grief and loss also. But right now, we're going to stick to losing people. So the pain is real. There's no other way that I could really put it. And then the guilt, maybe they were out and they passed. Maybe you feel like there was something else you could have done. Maybe you feel like, well, if you would have been there, or, because people die in all kinds of different ways and in all different kind of situations. So, you know, a lot of times it's that feeling of guilt. What could you done differently to prevent, you know? Number 3 is anger and bargaining. Um, the anger part is kind of self explanatory in the way of You just become angry. Some people become bitter. Have a lot of malice because it's just the grief has set in, the pain has set in, the heartbreak has set in, and you just get mad about it. You're mad. You might be mad at the world. You might be mad at God. You might be mad at everything around you and everything in life. Mad, like, how could this happen to me? Why has this person passed? Just mad, just full of anger and rage, and that happens, and it's definitely a part of grief. And bargaining, you could be bargaining with yourself, bargaining with God. Might feel like making a deal. I don't know. People experience all different ways of bargaining and different ways of anger. It's definitely not uncommon. Number 4 is depression, which things like this often lead to stress and depression. It goes to the point where you might not want to be here yourself. Feels like your whole world is upside down. You don't have the energy, the motivation to do anything. You know, I know of situations where people have been so depressed that they didn't even get out of bed anymore. They didn't want to do anything with themselves, you know, in which we'll go into different aspects of depression later because a lot ties into the depression and the stress. But right now, we're just going to go into these basic components of grief. So, number 5 is the upward turn. And the upward turn is basically having a shift. Um, I would say it's the part where you kind of get away from feeling as bad as you were feeling before. You might get a sense of hope again, where the depression isn't as bad as it was, or the anger and the pain and the shock. So that is really the most important point of healing, is trying to turn it around. Number 6, we have reconstruction and working through. So, of course, once you feel a shift, once you feel that sense of hope again, and it might not be a big sense of hope, it's just maybe just deciding that you don't want to be so down low and then in the dumps anymore. So just like a little glimmer of healing in your spirit. um, you can start working through. That's why it says reconstruction and working through the previous stages, realizing that it's real and that's something that you had to go through. You experience it, and now you want to take the steps to work through it so that you can eventually find peace with the situation. And number seven would be acceptance and hope. So we know acceptance is coming to terms with it and accepting that they are no longer with us and they wouldn't want us to be sad, depressed, anger, in pain and shock, denial, depressed, stressed. So it's the acceptance to realize that we have to get back on track. We we're never going to forget. There's always going to be a special place in our hearts, but we have to accept it and we have to get on the road to healing. And of course, hope is the road to healing. You know, there's you see hope again, you know that you can get through this and you can find peace eventually. So, those are the seven stages of grief. So, one, shock and denial, two, pain and guilt, three, anger and bargaining, four, depression, five, the upward turn, six, reconstruction and working through, seven, acceptance and hope. So, as I said before, many people don't know exactly what grief is. And so I will read to you what grief is, and then I will kind of give you my own breakdown. So, what is grief? Grief is an emotional reaction to loss. Most commonly, grief is connected to death and dying, but is also related to any loss that we experience in life. Could be work, money, relationships, play, hobbies, safety, physical capacity, or anything else we can lose. The body and the mind react in a variety of ways to loss, and generally, the more important or significant the loss, the more complications there could be. So, that is what is grief. Um, for me, I agree with all those things. And of course, we know grief looks like something different to different people. For me, I have experienced where I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I didn't want to be bothered, I didn't want to continue to talk. It could be many different things. So, a lot of people go through the same thing, but it's not always in the same order either. Some people might experience anger before the sadness and the heartbreak. You know, it just all depends on the person. But we all know what affects our mind also affects us on the outside. So I you can't explain grief like, well, if somebody was to ask, me, well, how did you feel? How was it's just for me an overwhelming sense of sadness and longing for the person back. But like I said, if unless you have experienced losing someone that was really close to your heart, it really can't be explained because the feeling that you feel inside and how you feel, it's really hard to explain. And I don't really wish the feeling on anyone. So, another thing that people probably get misconstrued, but I'm going to go into these four definitions because it kind of all goes along with grief. Um, but as we saw in the definition, the word loss, and they said it could be a loss of a lot of different things that could cause you to grieve. So I'm going to go into these four definitions, which is going to be loss, grief, bereavement, and mourning. They all kind of go hand to hand, but they're all just a little bit different. But it's all a different pieces of the puzzle, I would say. So loss, the disappearance of something cherished, such as a person, possession, or pet. Grief, the normal, multifaceted response to a loss, can include emotional, cognitive, physical, behavioral, and social components. Bereavement, the process of adjusting to a loss, and mourning, the culturally structured response to grief. So, as they're all different words and different definitions, but they're all similar and it all goes along with the package. And those four components are something that people experience when they lose. When they have lost something, took a major loss, a major hit, a major blow, that is what, you know, is experienced. But they're all different words, but they all tie in together. So a lot of people want to know, well, how long does grief last? And I think it's important to understand that normal or common grief appears to occur 50% to 85% of persons following a loss. There's no time limit. It could begin soon after a loss. And it largely resolves within the first year or two. That's what this says. And I would, in my experience, I would say, that is definitely possible. When you are really feeling it really hard and it really cuts, I would say it could last up to 2 years. But I will say that certain types of losses you never let go of. Like you could be fine and you maybe haven't cried in a year, and then maybe one day you see a picture or you hear a song or whatever it is, and then you have a moment. And there's nothing wrong with having moments. You take it day by day, you know. The main thing that is important is trying not to be that every day, working through and spending the time that it takes. So I would say, that is a good observation. And it's not that, oh, after 1 or 2 years, just like that, boom, it's gone. No, that's not how it works. But I will say that it gets less hard. It gets less hard to get through the day, like, or to accept, or to, I don't even use the word move on, because you're never going to forget where you just totally move on, that, you know, especially in a situation, if it's a child, it's a parent, it's a spouse. You're never just going to, boom, okay, I'm healed. Now I'm ready for the world. Yes. And it could be that, but it's always going to play a part in your mind, that, like I said, you could, maybe you didn't think about it in a long time, but one day you just hear something or see something that reminds you. And the thing that we want to do is to heal. I'm sorry about that. But like I was saying, the thing that you do want to do is get to the point where it doesn't hurt to think about, or it doesn't make you cry, or it doesn't make you upset. And that's all a part of the healing journey. Everybody's healing journey looks different. So when we go back to how long does grief last, it's not a question that you could really answer specifically for everybody in general. It depends on that specific person. So, basically, grief lasts as long as it takes you to accept and learn to live with your loss. Some people, it could be a few months. Some people, it could take years. The length of time spent grieving is different for each person. The time spent grieving also depends on the relationship with the person in the case of death, and how prepared you were for the loss. So, as we talked about earlier, some people, that it's going to happen. And so you kind of prepare as much as a person could prepare for the loss. But then there's unexpected situations where it happened all of a sudden. You just had no clue what was going to happen. And that is how it's happened with me most of the time. So after a death or loss, you may feel empty and numb, or you may be in shock. And I'm going to dive deeper in another part of the series about physical things that you would feel. But briefly, you may experience physical changes: trembling, nausea, trouble breathing, muscle weakness, dry mouth, trouble sleeping and eating. Guilt is often expressed as "I could have, I should have, and I wish I would have" statements. And you'll see that a lot, if you've ever been around somebody that's grieving, or if you've been grieving yourself. And whether you express it out loud, you say it out loud, or you say it to yourself. Um, Strange dreams or nightmares, being absent minded, withdrawal socially, or lack of desire to return back to work, you know. It's going to be sadness, fear, forgetfulness, crying, denying, envy, shame, resentment, loneliness, confusion, lack of faith, disbelief, ups and downs, slow thinking, fogginess, tired, lack of concentration, panic attacks, and basically don't let anyone convince you that something is wrong with you. All of these things are normal when you're experiencing grief and when you're going through the motions. You know, no one ever says that grief feels so much like this or that because it's just hard to explain. So I'm going to read this random thought that I got in my research. And they said, grief feels like having one less lung. It's the constant inability to fully breathe. There's never enough air. It takes a while to understand why. There's less air because there's less space. It's because someone who used to live outside you now lives inside you. It's hard to breathe because your heart grew. And that's a good one. That's a good way of putting it. A matter of fact, that always touches me. I really like that. But that's one way of putting it. So, as I go through this series, I'm going to go into a deeper dive. Like today, I just wanted to basically tell you what is grief and the 7 stages of grief. Going to just a little bit of what I'm going through or what I have experienced. And just to let you know that it's okay to feel these things and to feel this way, that it's normal. And to also say, I know that we just got through a new year and the holidays, and sometimes that is the most loneliest time, or the time of feeling empty, the time where you may really experience your grief, on the holidays, because it's like on Thanksgiving or Christmas or bringing in the New Year's, it's like, well, someone's not going with you to the New Year. Someone's not there at the Thanksgiving table. Someone's not there on Christmas with the family, exchanging gifts and whatnot. For me, having this happen right before the holidays just kind of put me in overdrive, because it's just like, okay, I have to grieve and I have to get my thoughts together and try to get my mind together, which I'm still going through the process. But it's also, okay, I have this holiday, and I have to make it through these holidays to even see the new year just without falling apart, because, and I've had my moments of that, don't get me wrong, but I know I have so much to do because it is the holidays. And the unfortunate part of losing somebody and going through this grief journey is that Life doesn't stop. You still have people around you that are in your life, other family members or friends. Life doesn't stop. You still have to pay bills. You still have to make sure things get done on time. So, for most people, the average person, you can't just lay down and give up on everything because you still have things that you have to accomplish. You still have responsibility. And sometimes that's the hard part. Sometimes you get in this mode where, and I did this before when I was grieving, when I told you guys I just worked and got drunk, worked and got drunk. That was my way of coping, the drinking, the alcohol, but also staying busy, trying to work all the time, work all the time. So to keep myself busy so my mind wouldn't be just stuck on my loss. And sometimes staying busy is good, but you don't want to stay so busy that when you finally get a chance to rest, or you're not busy, or you finally take a break, you just fall apart all at the same time. Then you really want to take the steps to go through it initially, because to me, it's nothing worse than the prolonged grief where you just decide that you're not going to deal with it, and then like you're in denial, you're not in reality, and then later on down the line it comes crashing in. You don't want to do that either. So it's really a healing journey. Either way you look at it, it's a journey. It really is. So lastly, I just want to say I am rooting for everybody who is going through this or has experienced this form of grief. Um, I know for me, losing a child is probably one of the top of the list forms of grief. Um, but we have to know that God doesn't put more on us than we can bear. And I want to say this before I end this video. When I think of my son and I think about this world we live in now, and I think about all the dangers and the drama and all the heartbreak and pain in the world, I just really think to myself that, well, now he's at peace. And honestly, he's doing better than I am because he's never going to feel heartbreak, the heartbreak that I feel now, the heartbreak that so many people have felt when facing a loss. He's never going to feel this way. And he's never going to experience getting out there and struggling or anything that is going to make him feel sadness, depression, stress, hurt, or pain in his life, because he is at peace and he is with the Lord. And I hope that I can move forward and do the best that I can to make him proud, because I feel like everything that I do when I made a promise to him, even though he was gone. And he was laying there, and in my last moments, and I just talked to him about some things and get off my chest. But it's a steps that we have to take. It's a journey, and everybody goes through the journey different. But I just like to think that it gives me my hope and gives me a little sense of peace to know that he's never going to experience what I am, and that he'll never hurt. He'll never hurt. And that's something that helps me get through this, helps me still find the strength to want to move on. So I am going to leave you with this in closing. And by the way, this is the longest video I've ever done, the longest anything. I just ask that you guys would like and subscribe and come back and revisit this with me as I do the second part of the grief series. I said today I was just touching on just a few things here, which is what is grief and the 7 stages of grief, and just doing a brief overview of the topic. As we dwell deeper into the topic, we will get more in depth, get more understanding, have more clarity of everything that goes along with it, which when we go into the next part, which I will probably try to do this next Tuesday, probably. I will do the second part since it's Tuesday and it's the 2 months since my son passed. So I picked this day, but I think I'm going to do part 2 next Tuesday as well. I can't guarantee the time. I don't know what time I will do it, but I will do it next Tuesday. And then, however long I decide to do this series, I think I'm just going to stick to the same day. So, right now I'm looking at 4 parts, but it depends on how I want to break it down. And these videos are not to have you relive, revisit, or feel sad or depressed. These videos is designed or are designed to give a better understanding and clarity of what you have been through, what other people have been through. If you know somebody that has gone through grief, maybe you know somebody who lost somebody really close to them, but this person may be in your life, but you're not experiencing grief because you weren't close to the person that they lost, that they were close to. And so maybe this could also help you to understand how they're feeling and how one emotion can go from another emotion, from anger to sadness to depression to shock, denial, and everything in the process. I just ask that you give people patience. If you love somebody and truly care about them, you know, if they're acting a different way towards you and you know that they lost somebody that is dear to their heart, just know that they're grieving and they might not even realize the way that they're acting. But I thank you for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed, like, comment. It helps the algorithm. So I'm going to leave with this. And this comes from Psalms 34 and 18. And I usually read the King James Version when I am studying myself, but I'm going to read, I guess you would say, a modern the version. Like I can't even. I think I talked too long. It's been 52 minutes. Okay, so a modern version. Okay, so Psalms 34 and 18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and save those who are crushed in spirit." And Romans 12 and 15 says, "Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn." Second Corinthians 1 and 3 through 4 is going to say, and this is the best one for me. It goes on to say, God comforts those who are grieving so they can comfort others. And that has kind of been my inspiration for this is I know that God is helping me get through this, and I know that it's meant for me to help others. So again, Second Corinthians 1, 3 to 4 says, God comforts those who are grieving so they can comfort others. So I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you for watching my video. Go ahead and share this video, like, subscribe, and I will catch you the next time. I will do the next video next Tuesday at some point. So leave me any comments, and I hope you have a wonderful, blessed week.